The cotton house burns. The night breathes red, smoke curls like prayer, heavy, choking, holy. Flames lick through the rafters, hissing as if the devil himself exhales through the cracks. The air is thick with cotton dust and memory, with the scent of sweat and oil and terror. The overseer's shouts collapse into screams, then into silence. And there, at the center of it all, stands Clara, barefoot, unmoving. Her shadow dances on the wall, alive and calm, while the world comes apart around her. She does not cry. She does not run. She only watches, her face lit gold and crimson, her eyes reflecting the inferno like polished glass. Behind her, the slaves scatter into the cane fields, some praying, some cursing, some frozen by awe. The masters are nowhere to be seen. They are inside the fire, their voices swallowed, their power undone by the heat they once commanded. Every creak of timber sounds like chains breaking. Every fall of ash feels like judgment. The cotton, white and pure no more, turns black, burning into freedom. The night itself holds its breath. Even the wind seems afraid to speak, and still Clara stands. Smoke curls around her shoulders like a crown. Her palms, blistered and bare, hold the match that began it all. The fire doesn't touch her yet, though it should. It bends toward her, reverent, obedient, as if it knows she has suffered long enough, as if it understands who she is. In the distance, the bell of the main house rings, one final cry, desperate, futile. The sound carries over the fields, over the bayou, over every soul that once whispered her name in pity and now in awe. Her lips move, but no sound escapes. Maybe a prayer, maybe a promise, maybe the word freedom. Then she steps forward, slowly, deliberately, into the blaze. Her skin glows against the flame. Silhouette of defiance, a hymn of vengeance. The fire embraces her like an old friend. It devours everything but her fear. By dawn, the cotton house will be gone. The masters will be gone. Only ash and silence will remain, and in that silence, Clara's name will begin to spread. From lip to lip, from field to field, not as tragedy, but as legend. She is not running anymore. She is walking into eternity. The fire screams, then fades into a strange, holy quiet. Crackling wood becomes a whisper. The world holds its breath. Clara stands in the center of ruin. Her face glows in the pulse of orange light. Her eyes steady, like the fire was waiting for her all along. The air trembles with heat, with the ghosts of every name once called in pain. Around her, the night folds in. The field hands hide behind the sycamores, their faces wet, their prayers trembling. They do not understand what they are seeing. They think they witness madness. But this is clarity. The overseer's whip lies twisted in the dirt, blackened at the handle, smoking at the edge. The white columns of the big house in the distance shimmer like bones under moonlight. A gust of hot wind rushes through, and the ashes lift, circling her like moths. They settle in her hair, on her skin, marking her not as sinner, but as saint. In the hush between crackles, a single sound remains. Clara's slow, steady breath, alive, unshaken, unafraid. Before the fire, Clara's world breathes in chains. Morning light doesn't rise here. It crawls. It slips through the slats of the slave quarters like a thief, touching skin that never gets to rest. The plantation stretches for miles, endless fields of cotton swaying beneath the Louisiana sun, each tuft a whisper of suffering dressed in white. The air is thick with heat, flies and command, the smell, iron, sweat and sugar rotting slow in wooden barrels. Clara moves through it silently. Her hands are strong, her eyes stronger. She carries water, mends torn cloth, scrubs blood from the porch that the masters pretend not to see. The overseer watches her longer than he should. The mistress spits her name like poison, and yet Clara bows to neither. She has learned that silence is not surrender. It is survival. It is the slow, patient gathering of storms. At night, she hums to herself, a low, wordless song. No one knows its meaning, but the sound carries through the cotton rows, through the wind, through the dark. It is the same song she will hum when she lights the fire. Something stirs beneath Clara's calm. It starts small, a pause too long before she answers, a glance that lingers where it shouldn't. She feels it each morning, when the bell tolls, when she bends to pick the cotton that cuts, her palms raw. When she hears the overseer's laughter carry through the fields, like rusted metal. There is a rhythm to cruelty, here, predictable, rehearsed, and Clara learns its every note. She studies the sound of boots on dirt, the creak of hinges on the cotton house door, the way the oil lamps flicker near the rafters, how one careless spark could turn the whole world bright. No one notices her counting, no one hears her breath when she stops to stare at the barrels of kerosene, the fabric soaked and waiting, the air already smelling faintly of something that could burn. Freedom doesn't whisper to her, it hums low and steady, like a heartbeat under her ribs. Each night she feels it stronger, each night it speaks clearer, and one night soon it will speak in flame. Before New Orleans there was another place, another field, another name the world has taken both from her. She was born on a smaller plantation near Natchez, one. Into thunder, born while her mother screamed through chains. The midwife cut the cord with a knife meant for rope, and the child's first cry was drowned beneath a master's shout. Her mother called her Clara, meaning bright, a cruel name in a place where light never stayed long. Her earliest memories are of movement, of being carried, traded, branded, renamed. She remembers the first time she saw the river, wide as forever, dark as iron. She remembers the boats that carried the stolen and the sold, their eyes hollow, their hope left somewhere upriver where the songs no longer reached. She remembers her mother's hands, rough, warm, scarred, the way they smelled of lye and earth, the way they trembled when the auction bell rang. That day, the master sold the mother and kept the child. He said, "The young ones bend easier." The sound of the gavel became the sound of a life breaking in two. Clara never saw her mother again, only dreamed of her voice. A soft hum in the dark, half lullaby, half prayer. Years later, another man claimed her. This one from New Orleans. He liked to walk barefoot through his own house, to hear the boards creak under his wealth. He said he bought Clara for her hands, small, steady, obedient, but he used those hands for more than work. Our nights blurred into one another. The candles burned low. The air thickened with wine and sweat and something unspeakable. She learned not to cry. He liked the sound too much. When she was 17, she bore a child, a boy, skin like gold dust in the sun, eyes that never stayed still. For a moment, the world felt less cruel. For a moment, she believed God might be watching after all, but mercy never lingers here. When the mistress found the child, she smiled the way snakes do. By sundown, the boy was gone, taken for trade. No one said where, no one dared ask. That night, Clara screamed into the dirt until her voice cracked. The stars above her didn't move, the wind didn't carry the sound. Even God stayed silent. After that night, she never raised her voice again. Never spoke unless forced to. She became the quietest woman on the plantation, obedient in motion, unreachable in mind. But silence doesn't mean peace. It means the storm is learning to wait. She began to see symbols in everything. The chain that held the Gate, a circle that could break. The candle in the mistress's window and a fire too small to frighten anyone. The whip, a serpent that could one day turn on its master. She found pieces of herself in the smallest things. A spark under an iron pot, the hiss of oil on a pan, the glow of coals in the hearth. Each one whispered the same thing, "Remember me," and she did. Years passed. The master grew old, the overseer meaner. The house fell into disrepair. The fields grew heavy with rot. But Clara never forgot the sound of her child's cry, or the silence that followed. Some nights, when the moon was full and the others slept, she would walk to the edge of the field. She'd close her eyes and listen, not for voices, but for the crackle of something deep inside her, something alive, buried and waiting. When rain came, she stood beneath it and let it wash over her skin like baptism. She'd whisper her mother's name, her child's, her own. And every time, the sound would end the same way, burning in her throat, unfinished. The scars on her back never healed right. The flesh rose in ridges, like rivers on a map. Sometimes she traced them with her fingertips, following their paths until she found one that stopped midway, as if it had nowhere left to go. That was how she felt. Halfway to something, halfway to freedom, halfway to fire. The years made her careful, the pain made her wise, the loss made her dangerous. By the time the world brought her to New Orleans, she had already died once. What remained was not a woman made to serve. It was a spark walking in flesh. She didn't know when she would ignite, only that she would. They said Clara was calm, too calm, a stillness that made even the cruel uneasy. She moved through the house like a shadow that remembered being human. No wasted steps, no sound when she passed through doorways. Her eyes stayed lowered, but they saw everything. In her silence, the world revealed itself. The master's tremor when he poured his wine. The mistress's sighs before she opened her pills. The overseer's breath, thick with guilt and tobacco. Each noise, each habit, each human flaw, Clara collected them like small, invisible weapons. She learned that words were not the only way to speak. A turned glance could insult. A still hand could defy. A single second of unbroken eye contact could slice through years of obedience. And she began to do it. Subtly, when the mistress called, Clara would wait half a heartbeat longer before answering. When the master entered the kitchen, she'd keep her back turned just long enough to remind him she had a spine. They noticed, but they couldn't name it. It was not rebellion. Not yet. It was precision, the kind that only pain can teach. At night, she whispered to no one. Her words were smoke, her prayers ash. But they were words still, meant for the only listener who mattered, herself. Sometimes she'd sit by the fire and watch the flames lean and sway. She thought about how they moved, untamed but patient. Fire doesn't chase what it wants. It waits until something dry enough dares to touch it. She began to mirror that patience. Every morning, every chore, every command was practice. Control over impulse, mastery over rage. They thought they had broken her. They had only sharpened her. She studied everything, the locks on the doors, the way the cellar key was kept under, the blue porcelain bowl, the rhythm of footsteps on the wooden stairs, who was heavy, who was drunk, who was careless. She memorized the house like scripture. The other slaves whispered that Clara had gone quiet in the head. That grief had hollowed her out. But that's what happens when you confuse silence with surrender. Her silence wasn't emptiness, it was planning. Every thought she didn't speak was a match she refused to strike too soon. In dreams, she still saw her mother, sometimes by the river, sometimes in the fields, always whispering the same words. Freedom don't come from running. It come from deciding you done being afraid. The phrase stayed with her, a heartbeat, a rhythm, a prophecy. She began to test the edges of obedience. Small acts first, letting the stew burn, leaving a window open, hiding a tool in the wrong drawer. Each mistake was deliberate, each consequence, a study in their reactions. The overseer shouted, the mistress slapped. The master sighed, but none of them saw the pattern forming. It wasn't defiance, it was choreography, a dance of control in a house built on domination. She started collecting things. Tiny glass shards from a broken lamp, a piece of flint, a torn scrap of the eye, mistress's wedding dress, a child's lost ribbon. Blue like the morning before the storm, objects became symbols, every one of them tied to something taken from her body, her child, her freedom. To anyone else they were trash. To her, they were a map, fragments of a world she would soon remake in fire and silence. The dreams grew darker. Sometimes she woke with her fists clenched, nails cutting into her palms. Once she found herself standing by the kitchen door, holding the flint. She hadn't realized she'd risen from her bed. She didn't remember walking, but she knew why. The mind remembers what the heart won't confess, and Clara's heart had made its confession long ago. By now, she no longer prayed for freedom. She prayed for ending. An ending that would be loud enough to echo through the generations that followed. They would say later that the signs were all there. The stairs, the silence, the sudden tremor of the lamps. But no one saw it clearly then, because people blinded by power rarely recognized the moment before their undoing. And that undoing was already moving, slow, invisible, unstoppable. It began not with an act, but with a whisper, one that only Clara could hear. Soon. It happens on a morning thick with humidity, the kind that glues breath to skin, the kind that makes everything feel heavy, even time. The bell rings, sharp and merciless. Voices rise. Boots scrape dirt. And Clara, steady as always, moves toward the cotton house. Inside, the air is already choking. Cotton dust floats like ghosts in sunlight. It clings to sweat, to lashes, to lungs. Every breath burns. She ties her apron. She begins the endless rhythm. Stuff, press, bind, lift. The same movement again and again. Hands bleeding, mind drifting. Then she hears him, the overseer. Thomas Hale, a man who believed cruelty was a kind of language. He walks in with his whip dragging behind him like a tail, talking too loud, laughing too freely. The kind of laugh that means something terrible is about to happen. He stops behind her, close enough that she feels his breath. He says her name once, slow. Clara. She freezes. The whip handle slides against her back, tracing her spine. He tells her she missed a bail yesterday. He tells her that laziness has a cost. Her hands tighten around the cotton she's holding. She says nothing. He waits. He wants her to beg. When she doesn't, the laughter stops. The silence thickens. Then, a sound. A sharp crack. Air splitting. The whip bites her shoulder open. Skin tears. She doesn't scream. She doesn't move. He hits her again. And again. Each strike lands like thunder. Each one met with the same stillness. But something inside her shifts, not breaks, shifts. Her breath grows quiet, her gaze unfocused. She is no longer here in this room. In her mind, she is standing somewhere else. A field on fire, a house collapsing in red light, and herself walking into it, unafraid. The pain becomes distant. The sound of the whip becomes the sound of wind. And in that wind, she hears her mother's voice again. Freedom don't come from running. When he's done, Hale throws the whip aside and spits near her feet. You think you're made of something special? He sneers. Don't forget what you are. She lifts her head then, for the first time. Her eyes meet his. No fear, no tears, just stillness, so still it terrifies him. For a moment he almost steps back. Almost. But he doesn't. He laughs again, uneasy this time, and walks away, leaving her there, bleeding into the dust. The others stare, silent. No one dares to move. Clara rises slowly, wipes the blood from her neck, and goes back to work. Not one sound leaves her mouth. That night, she cannot sleep. The wound burns like a second heartbeat. Each pulse of pain feels like a drumbeat in her skull. She sits by the small fire outside the quarters. The flames sway and hiss, and she studies them, really studies them. How they move, how they feed, how they wait. The others talk around her, about work, about food, about nothing. She hears none of it. Her eyes stay fixed on the fire. And somewhere in that dance of light and smoke, she understands something she hadn't before. There are two kinds of pain in this world, the kind that destroys and the kind that builds. She feels both inside her, and she knows the next time someone calls her name, the world will change. A week passes. The wound begins to heal, but her silence grows heavier. She works, she obeys. But every movement feels like a countdown. The nights stretch longer. The dreams come faster. Dreams of fire, of ash, of freedom glowing in orange light. Each dream ends the same way, her hand reaching toward a flame that never burns her. Then one night, a storm rolls in. Wind howls through the shutters. Rain lashes the windows. And in the cotton house, the lamps sway on their hooks. Clara stands in the doorway, watching the flicker of light across the barrels of kerosene. The smell rises, sharp, metallic, dangerous. She closes her eyes and inhales. The world feels smaller suddenly, like every breath is leading her somewhere she can't turn away from. The storm outside screams, the lamps inside tremble, and in that chaos, something in her finally settles. Not rage, not madness, clarity, the kind of calm that comes before an ending. When morning comes, she works again, quiet, obedient, invisible. But the decision is already made. The overseer doesn't notice her glances. The master doesn't see her counting the lamps. The mistress doesn't hear her humming under her breath, a song her mother once sang before the fields went quiet. By sundown, she knows the truth. There will be no justice for her. There will be no mercy. Only the fire. And she is no longer afraid of it. Days bleed together. The wound scabs, the fields shimmer. The world pretends nothing has changed. But inside Clara, something hums, low, steady, unrelenting. It is not anger. It is not fear. It is clarity. She moves slower now, deliberate, every step measured, every glance precise. Like someone who has seen the ending and is walking toward it without hurry. The overseer calls her name again, days. Later, she answers softly, calmly. The same stillness that once protected her now unsettles. He watches her too long, tries to find something in her eyes. Remorse, pain, submission. Finds nothing. Just a dark quiet that swallows him whole. At night, she listens to the rain tapping against the roof of the quarters. Each drop sounds like a clock. Tick, tick, tick. She counts them until her thoughts go still, until her breath matches their rhythm, until she can hear nothing but the sound of her own heart beating steady, like a drum before war. The others whisper about her now. They say she's cursed. They say the fire in her eyes means she's marked. She doesn't correct them. Let them fear her. Fear keeps them safe from suspicion. She begins to notice things she never saw before. The small cracks in the cotton, house beams, the way the wind slips under the door. the way oil seeps from the barrels, when the lids aren't sealed tight. The world reveals itself to her in tiny, perfect truths, every weakness, every path, every spark waiting to be born. She steals moments when no one watches, collects scraps, torn cloth, dry husk, splinters of kindling, hides them beneath the floorboard, near the wall where the wood is softest. She never rushes, never looks over her shoulder. Patience. Patience is how the powerless build their freedom. In the evenings, the plantation's music rises, the master's laughter spilling from the house, the faint echo of the piano bleeding into the air. It drifts toward the quarters like perfume, sweet, nauseating. Clara sits in the dark, sharpening a thought that's sharper than any blade. They call this place home, but every nail, every wall, every board was built with stolen breath, and she knows what is built from stolen breath can burn. She begins to watch the sky differently. The sunset no longer feels like mercy. It feels like warning. Each night it drips blood red into the trees, and she feels the pull again, not of rage, of destiny. When she closes her eyes, she no longer dreams of running. She dreams of standing still while everything burns around her, and in the glow she is finally seen. Stillness. That is her weapon now. Stillness that disarms. Stillness that listens. Stillness that waits for the right moment to strike. Even the animals sense it. The dogs no longer bark when she passes. They whimper instead, low, uncertain, as if they can smell the smoke that hasn't come yet. One afternoon, the master's youngest son, barely a man, approaches her near the well. He tries to speak to her kindly, to play the part of mercy. But even he feels it, the distance, the unyielding quiet that no soft word can cross. He steps back, uneasy. He will remember that moment later, when the fire rises and realize he once stood in front of a storm and didn't know it. In the fields, Clara begins to hum again, the same tune her mother sang, but slower, deeper. Each note weighted like a stone dropped into still water. The others fall silent when they hear it. Something in the sound unsettles them. Too calm, too final, the song spreads, whispers, travel through the rows. They say Clara has been talking to the wind, that she no longer belongs to this place, that she's walking between worlds, and in a way, she is. By the seventh night she stops speaking entirely, only gestures, only movements, each one deliberate, each one rehearsed. When she enters the cotton house at dusk, the light hits her scar, a single line across her shoulder, pale against dark skin. It catches the glow like a crescent moon, a symbol carved in pain. She doesn't hide it anymore. She lets it gleam, because what was meant to mark her in shame now marks her in purpose. In that stillness, in that silence, she understands. The fire will not destroy her. It will reveal her. She is no longer a woman waiting to be freed. She is a storm learning how to open its hands. Something inside Clara uncoils, not suddenly and slowly, like a snake stretching after years of sleep. Her silence is no longer armor. It is ceremony, a preparation. Each morning begins the same dust, the same commands, the same chain of motions repeated until thought itself disappears. But inside that repetition, something new begins to live. Each breath feels heavier. Each step feels chosen. Each whisper of wind feels like it's speaking her name. The others still move like shadows, frightened of her quiet, but they sense it. Something gathering beneath her ribs, something that hums with the sound of purpose. She starts to see signs everywhere. The sky burns red at dusk. The cotton fields glow pale like graves in moonlight. And in the distance, the old oak, gnarled, bent, ancient, creaks with every gust as if whispering soon. When she looks at the cotton house now, she doesn't see walls. She sees tinder, she sees confession, every beam soaked with years of sweat and sin, every board a page waiting to be set aflame. She touches the rough wood when no one watches, presses her palm flat against it, feels the heartbeat of the house, the echo of every scream it swallowed, every tear it's stolen. It lives on pain. And she knows now, pain can feed more than sorrow. It can feed flame. At night, she kneels by the dying embers of the quarter's fire, everyone else asleep. Only the hiss of insects, the breath of wind, the faint rustle of the fields. She closes her eyes. Her scar throbs, a reminder of what was taken. She presses her fingers against it, feeling the ridges. A map of pain, a path leading her to the edge of herself. And there, at that edge, she finds peace, not mercy. Peace. The quiet kind that feels like understanding, not forgiveness. The fire will not be vengeance alone. It will be a message. To the land, to the air, to the memory of every soul who bent and broke under the same sky. She imagines them, the women before her, their backs marked, their eyes dimming beneath the same weight. She imagines their voices rising through smoke, their chains melting into dust, their names spoken for the first time by flame. She begins to pray again, not to any god she knows, but to the fire itself. Her lips barely move. The words are more rhythm than speech. Let the light remember us. Let the ashes tell our names. Let no master sleep in peace again. The next morning, the world feels quieter. The birds sing softer. The overseer's voice doesn't pierce as deep. The air feels waiting. She senses it, the turning, the balance beginning to tip. Every sound sharpens, the rattle of chains, the crack of boots, the distant laughter spilling from the big house. They all sound the same to her now. Fuel. The fear that once clung to her skin begins to fall away like old cloth. When the whip cracked last, it left something behind. Not pain, not scar, but knowing. The knowing that no man, no chain, no god carved by their hands could touch her spirit again. She begins to walk differently, shoulders straighter, head higher, her pace calm, almost regal. The others watch in disbelief, as if she has forgotten her place. But Clara hasn't forgotten. She has outgrown it. She finds herself speaking softly to the flames when she tends the kitchen stove, telling them secrets, telling them what's coming. The cook, an old woman named Effie, notices. "Girl, what you mumbling to that fire for?" she asks. Clara only smiles. Fire knows more than people do. Effie laughs uneasily, shakes her head. But when Clara walks away, she swears she hears the stove crackle louder, like it answered. By the week's end, Clara dreams no more of her mother's voice. The dreams are all fire now, but not wild, controlled, purposeful. The kind of fire that walks where it chooses. One evening, she stands by the window of the quarters, looking out across the fields. The setting sun turns the rows into rivers of gold, and for a heartbeat, she sees herself reflected in the glass. The scarred shoulder, the still eyes, the faint flicker of light. Against her skin, it looks like she's already burning, and she smiles. The fear that had lived in her bones her whole life has finally gone quiet. What remains is not rage, it's truth, simple, solid, inevitable. The house built from her suffering will burn, and she will walk into it, not to die, but to end. The nights grow longer, but Clara's sleep is shallow and fierce. She rises before the others, moving through the dim like a thought that has already decided itself. The quarters breathe slow and heavy. A child rolls in thin blankets. An old woman mutters a dream song that sounds like prayer and threat at once. In the half-light, Clara gathers what the world thinks of as nothing: the scraps, the ribbons, the small dry bits of cotton tucked where no one bothers to look. She keeps one eye on the house, the other on the yard. The big house is a pale mountain against the sky, windows blinking with lamplight. Inside it, the masters clink glasses and fold their hands and pretend the world outside their walls is tidy. Outside, the lanterns are lit and guttered. Everything appears ordinary. That ordinariness is her ally. She maps the plantation in her head so thoroughly that she can feel the bones of it under her feet. The path from the quarters to the cotton house, the soft spot in the ground where a board creaks, the precise place the lantern hangs crooked and throws shade that makes the steps invisible. These are not details. They are geometry. They are instructions. She practices them in the dark, walking the route with bare feet, feeling the dirt, learning where a pebble will bite, where the cane will whisper. Each repetition turns a hazard into a friend. Clara collects oil from the kitchen when the cook looks away. She places the little tin under a loose floorboard she loosens with a flat stone. A small theft she can hide inside the noise of the day. She folds the mistress's torn handkerchief into a tight packet and tucks it inside the hem of her dress. It will be kindling of a different kind, memory-turned flame. She hides matches she shapes from flint and broken bottle glass, the edge of glass ground smooth by a child's secret. The things she gathers are humble and holy. She speaks in silence to the objects she holds. A scrap of cloth is not cloth. It is a page where names will be written in smoke. A length of rope is not rope. It is a ledger of the hands that tied it. The kerosene smells like prophecy, metallic, sharp, humming with potential. When she breathes it in, the scent fills her chest and makes the world very small, very close and very precise. She rehearses timing like prayer. The overseer rides out to check the south rows on Wednesdays. The master takes his midday nap after the first meal. The son walks by the well at dusk. These are rhythms, and rhythms can be learned and folded inside another rhythm. The slow, inevitable pulse she hides beneath each breath. She times the creak of a particular hinge with her footfall until the noise becomes a curtain she can step through. Clara sets small, deliberate distractions into the day. She lets the stew boil a minute longer than it should, sending the cook to fuss. She drops a basket in the yard so the older men must help lift it. She asks the wrong questions to the overseer so his patience runs thin. None of it is chaos. Each false note is a place where a tension loosens, a seam where the fabric can be pulled. She returns to the cotton house night after night beneath the pretense of work. She touches the beams, runs her hands along the rafters and thinks of their names: wood, sweat, history. She notices the barrels of oil stored in the corner, lids not quite tight. She learns the smell of the rope, the sound it makes when twisted. She listens to the building breathe and files that sound away. The building has been a prison and a ledger. Tonight she makes it a tomb for what has shackled them. In the quiet, she teaches a few of the closest to her a language made of nods and glances. Effie, the cook, learns that a hand across the chest means watch the house. A tug of the apron means delay. The man who mends shoes learns to place his foot in a particular spot by the back gate at a certain hour. They are not conspirators in the way the masters imagine rebellion. They are careful people learning to move slow enough to become invisible. They will be her shadow, her alibi, her chorus. There are small confessions around the fire. Effie presses a tin cup into her hand, the cook's only warmth. A man leaves a scrap of bread by her sleeping place. Love and pity are not the same here. They are currency, and she spends them sparingly. Effie's eyes hold a warning and a kind of mercy. "You sure?" Effie asks once, voice as soft as a wrapped ember. Clara only nods. Words would make the plan a thing to be stolen back by fear. Ritual builds in the margins. Before the night, she washes in cold river water, kneading at her scar until she feels the memory loosen its grip. She hums the song slower and lower, threading it through her bones until melody becomes code. The match she intends to strike will be the last syllable of that melody. She dresses in clothes. Something inside Clara uncoils, not suddenly and slowly, like a snake stretching. After years of sleep, her silence is no longer armor. It is ceremony, a preparation. Each morning begins the same. The same dust, the same commands, the same chain of motions repeated until thought itself disappears. But inside that repetition, something new begins to live. Each breath feels heavier, each step feels chosen, each whisper of wind feels like it's speaking her name. The others still move like shadows, frightened of her quiet, but they sense it. Something gathering beneath her ribs, something that hums with the sound of purpose. She starts to see signs everywhere. The sky burns red at dusk. The cotton fields glow pale like graves in moonlight, and in the distance, the old oak, gnarled, bent, ancient, creaks with every gust as if whispering soon. When she looks at the cotton house now, she doesn't see walls. She sees tinder. She sees confession, every eye, beam soaked with years of sweat and sin, every border page waiting to be set aflame. She touches the rough wood when no one watches, presses her palm flat against it, feels the heartbeat of the house, the echo of every scream it's swallowed, every tear it's stolen. It lives on pain, and she knows now, pain can feed more than sorrow. It can feed flame. At night, she kneels by the dying embers of the quarter's fire, everyone else asleep. Only the hiss of insects, the breath of wind, the faint rustle of the fields. She closes her eyes. Her scar throbs, a reminder of what was taken. She presses her fingers against it, feeling the ridges. A map of pain, a path leading her to the edge of herself. And there, at that edge, she finds peace. Not mercy. Peace. The quiet kind that feels like understanding, not forgiveness. The fire will not be vengeance alone. It will be a message to the land, to the air, to the memory of every soul who bent and broke under the same sky. She imagines them, the women before her, their backs marked, their eyes dimming beneath the same weight. She imagines their voices rising through smoke, their chains melting into dust, their names spoken for the first time by flame. She begins to pray again, not to any god she knows, but to the fire itself. Her lips barely move. The words are more rhythm than speech. Let the light remember us. Let the ashes tell our names. Let no master sleep in peace again. The next morning, the world feels quieter. The birds sing softer. The overseer's voice doesn't pierce as deep. The air feels waiting. She senses it. The turning, the balance beginning to tip. Every sound sharpens, the rattle of chains, the crack of boots, the distant laughter spilling from the big house. They all sound the same to her now. Fuel. The fear that once clung to her skin begins to fall away like old cloth. When the whip cracked last, it left something behind, not pain, not scar, but knowing. The knowing that no man, no chain, no god carved by their hands could touch her spirit again. She begins to walk differently, shoulders straighter, head higher, her pace calm, almost regal. The others watch in disbelief, as if she has forgotten her place. But Clara hasn't forgotten. She has outgrown it. She finds herself speaking softly to the flames when she tends the kitchen stove, telling them secrets, telling them what's coming. The cook, an old woman named Effie, notices. "Girl, what you mumbling to that fire for?" she asks. Clara only smiles. Fire knows more than people do. Effie laughs uneasily, shakes her head. But when Clara walks away, she swears she hears the stove crackle louder, like it answered. By the week's end, Clara dreams no more of her mother's voice. The dreams are all fire now, but not wild, controlled, purposeful, the kind of fire that walks where it chooses. One evening, she stands by the window of the quarters, looking out across the fields. The setting sun turns the rose into rivers of gold, and for a heartbeat, she sees herself reflected in the glass, the scarred shoulder, the still eyes, the faint flicker of light against her skin. It looks like she's already burning, and she smiles. The fear that had lived in her bones her whole life has finally gone quiet. What remains is not rage. It's truth, simple, solid, inevitable. The house built from her suffering will burn, and she will walk into it, not to die, but to end. The nights grow longer, but Clara's sleep is shallow and fierce. She rises before the others, moving through the dim like a thought that has already decided itself. The quarters breathe slow and heavy. A child rolls in thin blankets. An old woman mutters a dream song that sounds like prayer and threat at once. In the half-light, Clara gathers what the world thinks of as nothing. The scraps, the ribbons, the small dry bits of cotton tucked where no one bothers to look. She keeps one eye on the house, the other on the yard. The big house is a pale mountain against the sky, windows blinking with lamplight. Inside it, the masters clink glasses and fold their hands and pretend the world outside their walls is tidy. Outside, the lanterns are lit and guttered. Everything appears ordinary. That ordinariness is her ally. She maps the plantation in her head so thoroughly that she can feel the bones of it under her feet. The path from the quarters to the cotton house, the soft spot in the ground where a board creaks, the precise place the lantern hangs crooked and throws shade that makes the steps invisible. These are not details. They are geometry. They are instructions. She practices them in the dark, walking the route with bare feet, feeling the dirt, learning where a pebble will bite, where the cane will whisper. Each repetition turns a hazard into a friend. Clara collects oil from the kitchen when the cook looks away. She places the little tin under a loose floorboard she loosens with a flat stone. A small theft she can hide inside the noise of the day. She folds the mistress's torn handkerchief into a tight packet and tucks it inside the hem of her dress. It will be kindling of a different kind, memory turned flame. She hides matches she shapes from flint and broken bottle glass, the edge of glass ground, smooth by a child's secret. The things she gathers are humble and holy. She speaks in silence to the objects she holds. A scrap of cloth is not cloth. It is a page where names will be written in smoke. A length of rope is not rope. It is a ledger of the hands that tied it. The kerosene smells like prophecy, metallic, sharp, humming with potential. When she breathes it in, the scent fills her chest and makes the world very small, very close, and very precise. She rehearses timing like prayer. The overseer rides out to check the south rows on Wednesdays. The master takes his midday nap after the first meal. The sun walks by the well at dusk. These are rhythms, and rhythms can be learned and folded inside another rhythm. The slow, inevitable pulse she hides beneath each breath. She times the creak of a particular hinge with her footfall until the noise becomes a curtain she can step through. Clara sets small, deliberate distractions into the day. She lets the stew boil a minute longer than it should, sending the cook to fuss. She drops a basket in the yard so the older men must help lift it. She asks the wrong questions to the overseer, so his patience runs thin. None of it is chaos. Each false note is a place where attention loosens, a seam where the fabric can be pulled. She returns to the cotton house night after night beneath the pretense of work. She touches the beams, runs her hands along the rafters and thinks of their names: wood, sweat, history. She notices the barrels of oil stored in the corner, lids not quite tight. She learns the smell of the rope, the sound it makes when twisted. She listens to the building breathe and files that sound away. The building has been a prison and a ledger. Tonight she makes it a tomb for what has shackled them. In the quiet, she teaches a few of the closest to her a language made of nods and glances. Effie, the cook, learns that a hand across the chest means watch the house. A tug of the apron means delay. The man who mends shoes learns to place his foot in a particular spot by the back gate at a certain hour. They are not conspirators in the way the masters imagine rebellion. They are careful people learning to move slow enough to become invisible. They will be her shadow, her alibi, her chorus. There are small confessions around the fire. Effie presses a tin cup into her hand, the cook's only warmth. A man leaves a scrap of bread by her sleeping place. Love and pity are not the same here. They are currency, and she spends them sparingly. Effie's eyes hold a warning and a kind of mercy. You sure? Effie asks once, voice as soft as a wrapped ember. Clara only nods. Words would make the plan a thing to be stolen back by fear. Ritual builds in the margins. Before the night, she washes in cold river water, kneading at her scar until she feels the memory loosen its grip. She hums the song slower and lower, threading it through her bones until melody becomes code. The match she intends to strike will be the last syllable of that melody. She dresses in clothes that will not catch too quickly, the kind that will hold near the heat and let her move. She wraps her hair tight, tucks the oil tin into the hollow of the board where no one thinks to look, and practices lighting flint in a way that is quick and not noisy. When doubts climb her throat, she drinks from a cup of bitter coffee and remembers her child's laugh like a bell. When fear hems her edges, she breathes the smell of kerosene until the panic becomes method. There is no heroism here, only arithmetic, a sum of small decisions that add up to annihilation of an order built on theft. She counts the costs and decides they are tolerable. The night before, there is no sleep at all. Thunder rolls across the sky and the plantation smells of rain and copper. The master talks loudly in the house, boasting of land and crops and men beneath him. Clara sits very still and lets the voices of power rise and fall like a tide. She thinks about the first time someone sold her mother and how the world turned its face away. She thinks about the list of names murmured at the quarters, the people whose lives have become a ledger. Each name settles into her in a new way, heavy and close, waiting for the moment to be spoken. She walks one last time to the cotton house. It leans under moonlight like a sleeping animal. The barrels shine dull and honest. The rope coils like a sleeping serpent. She presses her palm to the wall and imagines the heat, imagines the light sliding across the fields and uncovering the truth of everything built upon their backs. This act is not mere destruction, it is revelation. Dawn edges in thin and blue. The men are asleep in their houses. The dogs curl beside the master's porch. Clara kneels and draws a small circle in the dirt, a private altar. Into that circle she places the scrap of the mistress's handkerchief, the flint, the tiny bottle of oil, and a stone she polished smooth. She says nothing. She feels the plan settle like a second skin. At the appointed hour, she takes that circuit she practiced so many times. Her feet find the place where the board yields. Her hands find the tin. She lifts the lid and breathes in the thing that has been warming in secret for days. The scent is sharp. It sharpens her focus. Her heart beats steady, not loud. Her hands are not trembling. Behind her, the plantation is ordinary and cruel. Before her, it is unmade. She steps forward with the knowledge that some ends require only a single bright decision. And then the world tilts toward action. The night is heavy and wet, a cloth draped over the world. Lanterns gutter in their glass like slow stars, the sound of oil in a wick as soft as breathing. Clara's feet find the path she has walked 1,000 times in practice. The ground remembers the pressure of her soul. The cane whispers against her calves. The moon watches without judgment. She pauses at the edge of the cotton house, feeling the wood's warmth seep through the night air, as if the building already holds a memory of flame beneath its ribs. Her palm is steady on the door. The tin is cold against her fingers. The oil inside smells bright and metallic, promising. For a moment the world narrows to the scent, to the match tucked at the edge of her hand, to the particular hush in the yard that says the dogs are asleep and the men are drunk and the son's footsteps are slow. She eases inside like a ghost, careful of the board that creaks despite 100 rehearsals. The darkness inside the cotton house is not empty. It is full of the soft breathing of stored memory. Bales folded like folded lives, a smell of white that once meant wealth and now means weight. Her fingers trace the seam of a bale, feeling the grain of cotton like old hair beneath her touch. She moves the handkerchief from beneath her dress and tucks it into the gap between two bales, pressing it in with a deliberate gentleness that feels oddly like a benediction. She works quietly, methodically. A thin line of oil traces along the floor, red-black in the lantern light, cutting a trail like a script that will burn words into the dark. She lights the flint once in the hollow of her palm. The spark stabs the air, a small star. The sound is a whisper compared to the drums of her heart. She strikes again and again until the ember grows patient, hungry. It catches. The first flame is small, a mouth at the edge of the handkerchief. It smells of cloth and memory and the salt of her own breath. It licks and then remembers it is allowed. The cotton takes it and feeds it. The building inhales and then exhales flame. The sound is not immediate roar. It is a slow, satisfied hiss, the house clearing its throat. Outside, the world tilts. Dogs stir and then bark, a low rolling chorus that spills across the yard. A window shudders. The master laughs in his sleep and then jerks awake, voice thick with whiskey. Someone trips on a step. A lamp tips. The sound of chaos is a bad symphony, dissonant and raw. But inside, Clara moves with the strange calm of the sea before it breaks. The fire learns the house with respectful speed. It creeps beneath the rafters, it tastes the rope, the beams, the resin in the old wood. Everywhere it goes, it leaves a bright tongue of light. The bales, those folded lives, take the flame like a confession. A single bale collapses inward and becomes a throat that exhales sparks. The cotton's whiteness becomes the incandescent belly of the night. She could run. She could drop to the floor and flee into darkness, and let the others carry the story like a rumor. But she has never wanted to be carried. She wants the name spoken loud enough that it cannot be mistaken. She wants the record burned clean and the ledger of their masters' lives made ash. Footsteps pound the path outside, heavy and fast. Men curse, slap boots, shout orders that are swallowed by rising heat. The overseer's face appears in the doorway, lit from within by the interior flame. His features grotesque in the orange halo. He lunges for a bucket, for a rope, for something to tether the world back into shape. Hands grope. The sun's shape blurs at the edge. They batter at the door, but it resists, swollen with heat, a living thing that no hand can pry open without becoming part of its hunger. The fire's sound changes. It becomes a voice. It speaks in the crack and pop of wood and the metallic sing of nails popping. It tells of names. It speaks like the river when it swallows driftwood, inevitable and relentless. The smoke pours out in a black curtain, and when it reaches the night it stitches a new sky. It hides the moon as if the heavens themselves were learning what the earth has known. Something that had weight is being lifted. From the yard, voices rise to a raw pitch. Men weep in anger, women scream in dread. Fear is a loud animal. It runs in circles and then strikes. The dogs hurl themselves against fences. The quarters tremble with the sound. People spill into the open like seeds scattered by wind, blinking into light that will now scorch their faces. They flank the scene with small hands and blank eyes, and mouths shaped in O's that try to form a name but cannot find one. Clara stands in the doorway and watches the house burn. The heat curls around her like wings. Her skin prickles but does not flee. Pain is a distant bell now, less sharp than memory. Her lips move, shaping the song she has hummed in the dark for so long. It slips from her mouth, slow and low, a single line over and over, a stitch that keeps the past from unraveling into chaos. The tune becomes a proclamation. It calls names, not in grief but in ledger, itemizing stolen lives, tethering grief to justice. A figure from the big house stumbles forward. The master, supported by the son, eyes bloodshot, clothes singed at the hem, arrogance gone thin and ragged like paper in the flame. He screams for the law, for men, for God. His voice is a brittle thing. His hands, which once counted cotton as if it were holy, scatter at the heat. A lantern topples at his feet and rolls, spilling oil that becomes another artery for the fire to drink. With a private snap, his power slips between his fingers like smoke. Around them, the field hands watch. Some clap hands to mouths and cry. Some stand with faces like stone, the kind of faces that have learned how to keep everything inside except the most necessary things. A few run toward the blaze with buckets held uselessly, ritual attempts at control that become prayer. There are men who try to lift beams, who throw themselves at flames with a faith born of desperation. The fire takes them in and spits them out, changing the way the night sounds. Clara moves through this as if underwater, and then as if through wind. She is both participant and witness. She touches a beam with the back of her hand and lets the heat roll over her like a hymn. She calls no names aloud. She lets the flames speak for what she cannot make into speech. Her mind is not empty. It contains images. Her mother's hands, her son's laugh, the ledger of a life reduced to numbers. Each image flares as if the fire itself feeds on memory and returns a clean light in exchange. The overseer scrabbles at the back of the house, trying to free a trapped rope, but the heat is immediate, unforgiving. In one abrupt second, a beam cracks and falls. The sound is like a heart splitting. The big house seems to recoil in shame as the cotton house stumbles under its own new weight. Smoke boils and curls and clings to the cotton rows like a silk scarf in mourning. It moves across the land, and when it reaches the quarters it leaves a fine dust on faces and hair, ash like punctuation. People choke and cough and wipe at eyes until their palms come away grey. The smell of burnt fibre is everywhere, a bitter, honest perfume that carries the night's account. By the time the first men with shout and rifle gather, the cotton house is a living furnace. The heat paints the fields in a thin line of shimmering light. No one can cross the threshold without becoming book and bound in flame. The masters shout for punishment, for justice, for alarm, but the voice of authority is swallowed by the roof's roaring collapse. Beneath the falling sky of sparks and ember, Clara steps forward one last time. Her face is outlined against the inferno, a page of shadow and light. She lifts her chin, and her breath makes a small visible cloud in the hot air. She does not kneel. She does not beg. She walks into the mouth of her making, like a keeper returning to the altar. The world recoils and then holds its breath. A silence so total it seems the night itself might fracture. Her figure becomes a silhouette that the fire will remember. The blaze drinks her outline and returns her to the world as a story that cannot be burned away. The cotton house takes her, and in that taking something changes. The ledger of lives tilts, and the math of ownership falters. Around the field, people shout names now, not of owners but of the owned, and the sounds are jagged and holy. The fire answers with a hiss that sounds like unfastening. The night is not the same when it ends. It is marked with ash and songs and the first notes of a history that will not let its end be quiet. From the flames rises a new kind of silence, one that says, what is made by theft can be unmade by choice, and the last choice belongs to the taken. The night folds in on itself. The flames no longer roar, they hum. A softer, deeper sound, like the heart of the earth remembering its own rhythm. Smoke hangs thick, trembling above the ruins, and every ember glows like a thought, half remembered. The air is alive with heat and ghosts. Cotton dust drifts in the smoke, turning the darkness pale in places, as though the world itself is exhaling what it has swallowed for too long. The cotton house stands no more. It leans, it sighs, it crumbles. Its bones, black timber, warped nails, fall like exhausted giants. The last beam collapses with a sound too soft for all the weight it carried. And Clara, the woman who burned the world she was bound to, is nowhere to be found. They say her body should be there, folded under the wreckage. They dig, frantic and desperate, coughing in the smoke. They turn ashes with shovels, with bare hands, with curses. They find no bones, no fabric, no trace of skin. Only the outline of a body drawn in soot against the ground, a shadow branded into the dirt, as if the fire refused to eat her completely. The master stands at the edge, wrapped in a blanket, face hollow. His hair smells of smoke and failure. His mouth moves, but his voice is broken, a soft, useless sound. His son stares into the wreckage as though the world has been stolen from him. No one speaks. Clara's name aloud, but every glance carries it, every heartbeat repeats it. The women from the quarters move first, barefoot, silent, moving through the blackened grass. They come not to mourn, but to witness. One of them bends, touches the ash where Clara vanished. Her fingers come away grey, and she rubs the soot into her skin like a mark of belonging. Another hums low, a tune without words, something ancient and circular. Soon others join her. The melody rises from trembling throats. It fills the space where the crackle of fire used to live. It is not a lament, it is a vow. The sound crawls across the plantation. It moves through the cane fields, past the broken fences into the quarters, where children blink awake and men sit upright in their bunks, staring into the dark. The song reaches them, and something stirs. Something that has been sleeping for centuries. Something shaped like defiance. They whisper her name now. Clara. First softly like a prayer, then louder, like a memory demanding to be kept. Clara. 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 Each time the name is said, the smoke shifts. The ashes lift. The air thickens with presence, not ghost, not flesh, but something between. The overseer limps from the shadows, face wrapped in cloth, eyes wide and glassy. He mutters about punishment, about retribution. His hands tremble as he points toward the ruins. He says he saw her walking straight into the flame without fear, without scream, her back unbent. He swears he saw her mouth move as though speaking to the fire itself. And then, he says, the fire bowed to her, that it bent inward before rising higher. No one believes him out loud, but no one denies it either. Because by morning, the smoke takes a shape. In the grey dawn light with the fog rolling low, the ruins of the cotton house look almost like a figure standing upright, arms out, chin lifted, as if still walking forward. Someone gasps. Someone falls to their knees. Someone says the word, "Unafraid." By midday, the story has already begun to travel. Across the next plantation, a woman whispers that a slave burned her master's cotton and vanished into the fire. By the river, men hauling barrels tell of a woman who became the flame itself. In the quarters beyond, they say her spirit walks the fields at night, her footsteps lighting the path, her voice singing for the free. No two tellings match, yet all carry the same heartbeat. A Clara of New Orleans, the woman who set fire to the cotton house and walked into the flames, unafraid, and fear begins to change. Sides. The masters whisper to each other now. They talk of unrest, of contagion, of the danger of story. They send riders with orders, with punishments, with rules written sharper than before. But the rules burn at the edges of rumor, because you cannot chain a name once it has learned to walk. At night, when the air cools and the frogs hum in the ditches, the quarters are alive with soft sounds, the scrape of wood, the crack of rope, the hush of planning. Eyes gleam in candlelight, not with terror, but with purpose, and always, always, there's the whisper. If Clara walked into the fire and lived in its light, what can we do? The plantation changes. The overseer refuses to go near the ruins. The master cannot sleep. He dreams of her. Standing in the doorway, her eyes calm, her skin burning with gold light. He wakes, sweating, calling her name into an empty room. Weeks pass. Grass begins to grow where the cotton house once stood. The soil there is blacker than anywhere else. Thick, fertile, strange. Even the birds avoid it. They say nothing grows straight on that patch of land, that the roots twist in circles as if remembering the fire's dance. But the people, they grow different. Something invisible blooms in them. The air feels charged, like thunder held at the edges of the horizon, waiting for permission to strike. Children begin to hum Clara's song while fetching water. Old men carve her name into the handles of tools. Women, under the bright scorch of the sun, tie scraps of red cloth to their wrists. Not decoration, but reminder, a code, a pulse, a private fire. The story spreads beyond the boundaries of the plantation, beyond the county, beyond the reach of those who would silence it. Each retelling adds something, a new detail, a fresh spark. Some say Clara's body turned to flame. Some say she walked straight through the fire, untouched, vanishing into the cane fields. Some say she became the wind that stirs the embers of every rebellion. But the truth, the quiet, hidden truth, remains under the ash. She was not afraid. That is what they remember. That is what they pass down. Not the fire, not the ruin, but the fearlessness, and that alone is enough to haunt generations. The master's land, once proud and profitable, withers in silence. Crops fail, workers disappear in the night. The cotton house is never rebuilt. They call it cursed ground. The son inherits the property but sells it cheap, unable to bear the weight of his father's ghosts. Yet the soil remains black, fed by something deeper than decay, fed by defiance. On certain nights, when fog rolls from the river and the air tastes like smoke, travelers claim to see her shadow walking through the fields, her dress shimmering like coals, her eyes alight with calm. She does not speak. She only walks, each step a hymn, each breath a reminder that once in the heart of darkness, a woman chose to burn the world that chained her, and in doing so, became more than memory. The night holds her name differently now. It doesn't whisper it in fear. It sings it, softly, endlessly. Clara of New Orleans, the one who set fire to the cotton house, the one who walked into the flames unafraid. And the song goes on. Across time, across tongues, across the generations who rise and rise again, a pulse that says, fire can destroy, but it can also free. And when the last ember cools, when silence returns, the land exhales her story like breath, never gone, only glowing beneath the surface, waiting for the next brave soul to strike the match. The fire is gone, but the air still remembers. It clings to skin, to wood, to the edges of thought. A fine dust floats where the cotton house once stood, and every breath drawn near it tastes of ash and iron and grief. Days have passed, or maybe weeks. Time has loosened its grip. The world moves, but the plantation stands still, trapped in its own echo. Even the wind, when it crosses the fields, slows its pace as if unwilling to disturb the ashes. No birds sing here now. No laughter carries from the quarters. Only the hum of insects. The occasional cough, the long sigh of the soil exhaling heat. In the quarters, life resumes in form, not in spirit. Hands still work, backs still bend. But the air between the people hums differently. It carries something unseen, a shared vibration, a code of silence and understanding. They do not speak of Clara aloud anymore. Not because they've forgotten, but because to name her now feels dangerous. Because some names are prayers, and some are sparks. At night, when the lamps go dim and the moon sits low, they gather in the shadow of the ruin. They don't bring offerings. They don't kneel. They just stand there, feeling the warmth still rising from the ground. Sometimes one of them will hum her song, that low, circling melody born of smoke and courage, and others will join, barely above breath. The sound becomes a pulse in the dark, the kind that doesn't reach ears but settles in the chest. And though they call it the cursed ground, it feels, to them, more like hallowed soil, a grave with no body, a wound that glows instead of bleeds. The master does not leave his house. He sits in his chair by the window, staring at the black patch of earth that ruined him. His face looks carved, deep lines like cracked porcelain. He mumbles numbers under his breath, bushels lost, profit vanished, property gone. But what haunts him most is silence. No sound from the fields, no rustle of bales, no hum of obedience, only silence and silence. In a house built on power is terror itself. He writes letters to sheriffs, to other planters, to pastors. He wants explanation, containment, control. But all the ink in the South cannot rewrite the night Clara burned his world down, because that night has taken root, and it grows. Unseen, like fire beneath ash, he dreams of her now, every night, without mercy. Always the same image. Her standing in the doorway. The fire kissing her dress, her face calm, too calm. He wakes gasping, calling her name like a plea. But even in waking, he hears her voice, not screaming, not begging, just speaking softly, a whisper shaped like prophecy. He starts sleeping with lamps lit. He forbids talk of her name in the house, but servants hear him whisper it to himself when he thinks no one listens. Clara. 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 Like confession, like curse. Outside, the world shifts. Other plantations whisper. The story travels faster than wagons, carried by mouths that cannot be stopped. Some tell it as warning, what happens when a slave woman forgets her place. Others tell it as promise. What happens when a slave woman remembers her power? It becomes impossible to know which version is truer. Maybe both are. Months pass. The fields yield poorly. Rain comes late. Cattle die without reason. Some say it's punishment. Others say it's freedom reshaping the air. Either way, nothing grows the same. The ruins of the cotton house stay untouched. Every attempt to rebuild ends in failure. Tools vanish. Workers refuse to touch the soil. At night, faint lights flicker above the ashes, not flame, but phosphorescence, tiny ghosts of fire that shimmer and vanish like breath. And when wind blows across the fields, some swear they hear footsteps, steady, measured, moving toward the river. One night, an old man from the quarters, the one who saw the first spark, walks to the ruins alone. He kneels, presses his palm into the earth and whispers, "She did it for all of us." Then he closes his eyes, as if listening. For a moment, he smiles, and when he returns, his hands are black with soot, his eyes bright as coals. He doesn't speak for the rest of his days, but he hums Clara's tune until his last breath. The fire that burned the cotton house becomes more than memory. It becomes language. It moves through generations without words. Children who never saw her still dream of her. Women who never met her still feel her in their bones when the night air turns dry and the scent of smoke drifts from the cane. Even the men, hardened by labor and silence, bow their heads when her name is whispered. In time, they begin to call her not just Clara, but the Flame Woman, the one who burned her cage and became her own light, the one who walked into fire and did not vanish. She expanded. And history, that cold machine of numbers and names, stumbles when it reaches hers. Records say, missing. Ledgers say, property destroyed. But the songs, the stories, say otherwise. They say she still walks the edges of the bayou at night, her reflection floating on black water, her steps leaving trails of light that fade but never die. They say when a woman feels trapped, when the air grows tight and the walls close in, she dreams of Clara, and in that dream she finds a door. It is not always fire. Sometimes it is courage. Sometimes it is silence, but always it burns. Even the master's children years later speak her name differently, in secret, in guilt. Some say their mothers warned them, never look into a fire too long. You'll see her there. Some say their fathers woke screaming from dreams that smelled of smoke. Clara becomes the ghost the South deserves. Not a spirit of vengeance, but of reckoning. The fire she started does not stay in one place. It crawls into thought, into conscience, into memory. It flickers in every story told by those who remember chains, and yet, beneath the legend, beneath the awe, there is still the truth. One woman, tired of silence, chose to make noise. Her rebellion was not grand, not strategic, not planned by any council. It was the simplest, rawest thing, a refusal to die quietly, a refusal to bow, a refusal to remain unseen, and that refusal, that act of setting fire to what burned her, becomes the first spark in a field waiting for flame. Years later, when whispers of freedom spread through the land, when word of rebellion comes from far-off states, those who were there remember the night the cotton house fell. They remember the sound of wood cracking, the heat against their faces, the taste of smoke and deliverance, and they remember her calm, the way she did not run, the way she walked. In every uprising that follows, someone always says, "She walked into the fire unafraid." And the others nod, as though that alone explains everything. Because maybe courage does not always roar. Maybe it walks quietly, barefoot, through burning doors. The land itself seems altered by her choice. The soil near the ruin stays dark for decades. Nothing grows there but wildflowers, blood red and gold, blooming out of season, stubborn, impossible to uproot. Children pick them and leave them by doorsteps as offerings, not knowing why. Even as time blurs and faces change, and the world tries to move on, the story never fades. It lingers in the wind. It hides in the smell of rain on ash. It lives in the hush before thunder. And if you listen closely, on a night when the sky feels heavy and the air tastes of iron, you might hear it too. That slow, steady hum. The sound of someone walking forward through flame. Unhurried, unafraid, unbound. That is her legacy. Not the ruin she left behind, but the courage she left within. They say time buries all things, but time has never met fire. Fire does not die when it is smothered. It hides. It waits. It becomes ember, and ember becomes memory, and memory, when spoken enough times, becomes truth. So the truth of Clara did not end in that night of flame. It slipped through smoke and crossed rivers. It traveled from mouth to mouth, from one trembling heart to another, until even those who never knew her could still describe her eyes, her walk, her final breath before the blaze. Her story moved like wind in tall grass, invisible, unstoppable. Through fields of sugar and cotton, through towns that swore they'd never heard of her. But they had. Everyone had. In the hush of the work songs, in the hum of a mother rocking her child, in the prayer whispered before sleep, she lived. They called her the Flame Woman, the Shadow Walker, the one who burned the chains. Names changed, accents bent, but the soul of her remained the same. Generations passed. The old plantations crumbled into dust. Moss crawled up the stone walls where her name was once forbidden, and where overseers once shouted, only the sound of cicadas remained, endless, electric like sparks in summer air. No monument marks her resting place. No marble bears her name, because she does not belong to stone. She belongs to smoke, to the scent that lingers after rain, to the quiet power in every woman who refuses to bow. Some say she became the firefly, and that the glow of those tiny wings in the dark fields is her spirit wandering free, lighting the path for those still trapped in shadow. Others say she became the wind, the low sigh that rolls through the cane when the night turns heavy, the same sound that once whispered in her ear, now. And some, the dreamers, say she never left at all. That when a woman kneels in the dirt and clenches her fists and decides she will not break, Clara stands beside her, unseen, her palm warm, her voice calm. History tried to erase her, but history burns like paper. And in its ashes, her name still glows, because rebellion is not always a march. Sometimes it's a whisper, sometimes it's a match struck in the dark. The world called her a fugitive, a danger, a sin, but the world was wrong. She was not destruction. She was creation, the making of something new inside the ruins of what had always been. And maybe that's why her story endures, because it is not just hers. It belongs to everyone who ever looked at their own chains and thought, not forever. Each time a fire crackles in the hearth, each time light flickers against a wall somewhere, someone remembers. They may not know her name, but they feel her in the warmth, in the courage to speak, in the will to stand. And if you stand long enough in the silence of an open field, you might still smell it, faint, haunting, impossible to mistake, smoke, drifting on a wind that carries her story forward. Not as warning, not as legend, but as proof that one woman, with nothing but her hands, her pain and her fire, can change the shape of history. And when the night feels endless, when the stars hide and the earth sleeps, somewhere deep in the soil, something still burns, not with rage, not with ruin, but with remembrance, because the world once called her a slave. But the fire called her free.